Welcome to Testimony Mountain. It's always a joy to be here with Jessie. And before we launch in, just want to give you an opportunity, Jessie, to share what you've been up to and how people can connect in with you.
Yeah, a lot going on. I encourage people, you can always find what I'm doing on several places. One is the website, kingdomlivingwithjessie.com. I have a lot of new stuff up there. You can access my books, the courses, the different coachings, decodes that I do on there. Um, so I encourage people to check that out. You also can find a lot more of the stuff in regards to my affidavits and what's happening with that on timothycharlesholmseth.com. And I did have this week, I encourage people to, go back and look at that because I did put out several specific decodes from certain places, including the Butler, PA area, um, the upper Minnesota, extending all the way from the Georgia Strait through Minnesota to the New York areas, talking about that route and how that's used by the Brotherhood system. And then I also did the St. Cloud area and did a huge decode on the breeder programs there. So I encourage people to go back, look at those this week. And you can also always follow me on Twitter. That's probably the biggest place I put stuff out, in regards to my testimony, and a lot of happenings to happen on there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jessie. And that's kind of where we'll maybe launch today. It's just talking about, how do we share our testimony and what forms and what places and how that feels like to process.
Yeah, it can be hard. I think what's important is just to acknowledge there's different levels, different places where people are at
Mhm.
in their readiness to begin sharing about, what's happened to them, whether it's, abuse or trauma, or even, testimonies don't always have to be negative.
Mhm.
There can be good parts to our testimonies and our stories as well. But how do we get to that place, of being ready? And at the same time, I think what I was dealing with this week was being sensitive to permissions.
Mhm.
Um, that sometimes we feel this struggle or this uh, kickback that we're kind of hesitant to move forward in sharing our testimony, even if that's like, at church you've been asked to give it, or with friends, or maybe it's somebody you don't know, and you might feel a little bit of that hesitation. And that's the point where you really need to be sensitive to yourself and give yourself permission to share creatively in whatever way that you need to share. Um, so for me, it's been a long journey. There's different aspects to how I've shared. For me, it helped having, connections with a lot of different platforms,
Mhm.
where, on those platforms, I kind of focus topically on different aspects of my testimony. So that can be something you can be sensitive to is, where do you want to put your story out on? Um, and you can do that yourself. You can do that, just speaking. You can do that in writing. If, you're kind of more of the quiet type and you want to write a book, you can do that. And, in that, like, I think of, books that I've written where, I shared about some of the experiences of my chaplaincy, and I wanted to put those stories into writing. But in that, there's certain permissions, like you can't just share names, or sometimes you can't share locations, or um, certain identifiers in your story that then could be used against you in a negative way. So it's good to be aware of those things and to know that, as an author or even as a speaker, that you have those permissions. You can, you can change those details if you need um, to hide certain identities or certain locations. Some of us, that stirs up feelings of whether we feel safe or not safe sharing our testimony. Um, But those are some of the things this week, I was kind of looking at some of those things as I decided to bring out further things um, out of some of my testimony, particularly, I've talked about how I witnessed a lot of deaths. I have some stories of those particular deaths I witnessed of children that are in my affidavits. And so one in particular is the story I call the little girl Grace.
Mhm.
That's the name that I gave her. Um, but I decided I wanted to bring out more of her story because this was a real little girl. This was a girl that, you know, died horrifically. I was a witness to that death. And so, in wanting to bring up more of her story, I also really wanted to give people an image or, you know, I wanted people to be able to see her face as
Mhm.
I had seen her. And, that was a little difficult to, take the time to try to draw that out, um, to come up with, something that represented who she was and how I saw her at first.
Mhm.
Um, but, I gave myself permission to do that. And then, took it a step farther where with that image, I decided, I've never publicly yet brought out the fullness of her testimony that I, have written out in affidavit. So I, made that decision to read the affidavit as well. Um, but it was really difficult because it's for me, I guess it's easier um, when I present the certain things publicly because I present it in a manner where I feel safe
Mhm.
emotionally presenting those details. But then when I got to having to read it from the affidavit, that was really difficult because there's all those unsafe emotions that go with that and huge hesitancy, huge, like, I don't know if you've ever had that where it just feels like all your emotions are stirring up and you're like,
No.
like, yeah, like, I don't wanna do this, but
Mhm.
I do. It's like I really wanna do this,
Yeah.
but it's difficult to do because there's just such a depth of emotion that goes with it.
Mhm.
And, just it I don't even know the words to put with that,
Yeah.
but it can be overwhelming at the same time. There can be a relief, there can be a dread. It's like there was a couple of nights I didn't sleep. I was crying all night long,
Mhm.
which usually is not me, but it was all over just even in the prep work, like knowing I was going in that direction of doing that. I had to deal with all the emotional um, avoidance as
Mhm.
well as accepting, the
Yeah.
emotions too, but a lot of emotional avoidance where it's like, I really don't want to go there and I don't
Mhm.
want to bring that out, you know?
Yeah. And I can so relate, and even some things I was journaling with the Lord this morning, it was like, I don't wanna face certain things, and that
Yeah,
resistance. And yet, when we're able to bring it out, into the light with the Lord as our starting place,
yeah,
um, and then as we're ready, bringing it out into other places. It is healing. It is hard though, and that's the challenge of it. And so I totally get those emotions. And I was journaling with the Lord, and He was saying, "You can do this," and He was like, "No, I don't want to," you know, and no,
you're
I
like, "I
can.
don't want to." Right? Totally get that feeling.
Yeah. And, eventually got to the place where I was able to face some of that, and it was hard, and there, are tears and all of those kinds of things,
Mhm.
but instead of running away from the pain when we face it, that's where I believe a lot of the healing happens.
Yeah, it does, a lot of healing in that. And, it is not easy, but it's okay to acknowledge those things and, to be like, okay, Lord, I'm really emotionally avoiding or,
Mhm.
you know, emotionally distancing ourselves from certain things in our stories. I think is common among survivors. That's a coping mechanism. That's how we, maintain, um, uh, you know, environment of safety for ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's good to acknowledge that, well, hey, this is part of my safety and my coping mechanism.
Mhm.
But, if you stay in that, that can become unhealthy
Yes.
because, you get a lot of negative emotional suppression that goes along with that. And how long have you been suppressing? How long have you been avoiding?
Yes.
When the Lord opens it's like an onion unpeeling, right? When he opens certain things up and peels back more layers, that's because he knows that he's given you what you need in that time to deal with that now,
Mhm.
right? And if you continue to avoid and neglect, you're avoiding that work that the Lord wants to accomplish at that period of time in your life. And so there can be a wrestling that goes on there with the Lord,
Yeah.
and it is okay to say, Lord, I don't want to deal with that. I get the I don'ts too. Like I'm done, Lord.
Yep.
I'm done with that. Don't you dare open that big can of worms because
Mhm.
I will pitch a fit, Lord. It's like those are supposed to remain buried forever. I don't want to deal with those, but you get where the Lord says now's the time.
Yeah.
And in that moment, you have a choice. Really, it's an act of obedience. If He's opening that door, it's because there's a greater work beyond you.
Mhm.
Like you just part of that, you're getting part of that blessing. And it helps me to remember that all that the Lord, every thought that He has towards us, every good work that He's prepared in advance for us to do, all of those things are under that label good,
Yeah.
right? Which means that there's a blessing with that. Like none of it's not happening for our evil. It's not happening for our destruction. It's not happening to, cause our life to be a continual living hell.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Lord is doing it for our good.
Mhm.
And when we look at it that way, it makes that choice of, am I going to obey in this moment and walk in the way He set before me, or am I going to disobey, go my own way, totally ignore the Lord, try to ignore what He wants me to do? And when we do that, that's where the negative impact can happen. We won't be ready. We won't be prepared.
Mm.
Things that the Lord intends to put into place won't happen,
Yeah.
eh, you know?
Yeah. It was difficult this last week. Some memories surfaced in an unusual way, in the sense that I my husband was out of town, and I felt like I needed to go through boxes and boxes of mementos, things from my childhood, and in particular a little container of toys, from my
Mm,
childhood. And it was kind of that thing of, why did I keep these particular things, and how is it
mm,
connected in with what happened?
right.
And it opened up into some things that happened, I think, in the Black Forest in Germany. And it was pretty horrific stuff. And yet when we invite the Lord in, you
Mm,
know to those memories, Jesus um, lighting the pathway,
yeah.
with his arms around me and being safe in him. It transforms it from this horrific thing to, okay, now I think I can face this, as long as you're with me, Jesus.
Right.
And so we just get to take it step by step with them, knowing that, you know, they have a way through. Because sometimes
Mhm.
it feels so overwhelming. It's like, like we were saying, I'm done. I can't do this. I don't ever want to, you know, and each time that has happened, the Lord has been like, you can stop here. Um,
Yeah.
but there's more treasure for restoration in me and in, what took place when we
Yeah.
open that door to their love.
Yeah. And many of us, it's interesting that you said that, because I was thinking kind of along some of the similar lines this week as things were surfacing. Um, one of the things I looked at was how I filed things in my mind, because for many survivors, we're tortured to remember certain things, we're tortured to forget other things, or there's things that, further trauma that's caused to try to, make us suppress things.
Yeah.
But as children, a lot of us are smart, and we file things where, people can't take it away from us unconsciously.
Yeah.
And so I was looking at that, and, for me, like a default always, was just sticking to that a lot of stuff happened to me around age 5. Like I held on to that age as a number that I often will, oh, that happened to me at age 5.
Mhm.
And I was like, why did I why did I choose out of all those ages?
Mhm.
That wasn't my favorite year in life. That was a year I was getting introduced to a lot of evil things, and a
Mhm.
lot of really bad stuff happened. But why did I choose that? And I realized that, why did I choose that? That was the age where I learned I had a voice,
Wow.
where I had the right to say no. I had the right to say, I'm not going to participate.
Mhm.
I had the right to say, to vocalize that, to fight things, and to say, no, I don't want to be like you all. I'm not going to do these things. So that was really where I learned to assert my voice and to
Mhm.
say no, even though there was things I was forced to participate in or watch. Like in my heart, that was the year I chose to say no.
Wow.
So, looking at those things, and, you know, that kind of went along with your question, like, why did I choose these? Why did I set these apart?
Yeah.
And there can be a negative as well as a positive in
Mhm.
that, you know.
Mhm. That's true, and so I'm just now, diving into I took some pictures of it and, it's that processing through because some things I was like, "Yeah, I remember this and I have attachment. I remember when, this happened."
Mhm.
Other stuff, it was like, I have absolutely no idea. I don't even remember
Like, what
playing
is
with.
this? I don't remember playing with this. Like, why do I have this?
Yeah. And so, just taking it step by step, with the Lord, bringing it into the light, and that's
Mhm.
what we get to do.
That's right. I was thinking as you're talking, I was thinking back to some of my, childhood toys. I had those that, I was very attached to, but then I had, ones that I just played with in general, and,
Mhm.
didn't have much meaning to me at all. And, you know, I remember we had a soul GI Joe guy, like one of the big, not the little ones, one of the big old GI Joe guys. And, you know, I would have uh boys in our neighborhood that all wanted to play with that, and it would be like, no, like, what, it's useless, it's, you only got one. Like, I think eventually I made him into a boy Barbie. I was like, had him riding around in the Barbie car. But yeah, and then we had this, I think my favorite one was we had this open up house that was like a Sesame Street house
Uh-huh.
with the little, it was the older, like, where you just had the single, like, little wood figurines with the little circular head, and they were
Yeah.
painted to look like, certain characters. Those were common in the 80s, and
Yep.
you'd have like the little seats with the hole that they would
Yep.
fit into, and that was one of my favorite ones. But yeah,
Yeah, I
that
had a lot of those little people that I saved, and it was just interesting because a lot of them were in twos. There was, like 2 redheaded girls, 2 blonde girls, 2 boys, and then the
huh.
teacher or the mom and the grandma, but no dad. It was kind of interesting.
You're like,
Um,
why were there no men?
uh,
That's
and then my mom sewed our clothes and sewed a lot. But even looking at some of the clothes that I saved, it was just very interesting because they were mostly all red or blue, or both red
oh.
and blue. And
And
so,
was that
thinking
one of
about,
your favorite colors, or did you like wearing? No?
I mean, not necessarily, but it was like there wasn't girly things. There wasn't pink things. It was red and white, red and black, red and blue. And I love blue and I wear a lot of blue. I do wear some red, but it's just interesting looking back, knowing kind of the
You
color
saved.
programming and
Yeah.
all that.
I wore a lot of blue. That was my favorite color growing up. Um, but like I hated pink as a
Yeah.
kid. Like I think it was for me like it represented the girl, because I wasn't raised as a girly girl. I was a tomboy. I had lots of male cousins, lots of friends that my little friends when I was a kid growing up were all boys. I was the rough and tumble girl, right? So I didn't connect with the feminine, the
Mhm.
frilly, I hated dresses. You could not get me in a dress. In fact, I think I was one of the most creative children in what to do, alternative purposes for tights. Like I would, tie them to tree boughs and swing from them. I would, tie them on boxes and create trains to pull the little kids, around our house in. I would make these trains with the tights. I would do all sorts of stuff with them, because I refused to wear them. And but it's like why, you do stuff like that. But now, like after I think it was more when I started having kids of my own and
Mhm.
had little girls, I wanted to have that, you know, that option where they could be girly girls.
Yes.
But I
Yeah.
think in my childhood, I kind of connected it with weakness. I wasn't,
Yes.
I saw the girly, the feminine as something weak and didn't embrace that because that would mean I was weak.
Yeah. I grew up with a lot of boys too, and that was always the thing. And then, even a little bit, I don't know how old I was, but my mom was making me wear shirts, and it was like, well, the boys don't have to wear shirts when they're outside. Why do I have to wear
Right?
a shirt?
Why do I have to wear a shirt? Like, well, that's what girls do, honey.
Yeah.
And our innocence, right?
Yep. Yep.
I was like
So,
that too as a kid, just like, yep, barefoot, running outside, as spending as much time outside as I could. And
yep.
though I did like lilacs, like I liked
Mhm.
flowers,
Mhm.
and that was my sanctuary in our yard in Wyoming. We had a huge lilac tree, and I would go lay underneath it, and that was kind of my little getaway place where I would hide,
Wow.
smelling all the flowers, looking up at all the lilacs, and yeah,
We had a lilac tree in my childhood home too. So,
yeah,
oh,
that was a great tree. And the smell, like I think there was something there because I'm not one who usually smells,
yeah.
but there was something in that with the smell too for me that it was just a safe, beautiful
Yeah.
place. And I appreciated looking at the beauty of things that God had created, but I also like to like I always would say I had work to do and I had to go outside to play because I had so much work I had to do. And but when I look back, it's really funny. I tell stories in my book, Foundations of Kingdom Living, in one of the chapters about all my work as a kid. What did my work as a kid entail? It entailed bug hunts, uh, collecting bugs, especially night crawlers, because our family were fishermen. So
Mm.
I would find all the big night crawlers that we could go fishing with. Then I would do stuff. We had a sandbox, and I would, create imaginary food with sand and try to get my younger cousins and siblings to eat it. And then, climbing up the apple tree. So it's kind of funny when I look back at all the things that I considered work. Like I had to go out there, I had to work, I couldn't, had to get it done. And yet it was all silly kid stuff.
Yeah, that drive that we had early on to get it done.
Right.
Oh, well, the other thing, my mom made my brother and I each a clown. So, it was a
Oh,
block of wood, and then she did the head and the body and, all of that.
like painted it and stuff, the wood, or?
No, it was covered with fabric, but, that was
Oh,
the inside of it.
okay.
But again, it was one of those things where it was like, mine was kind of an army green, and it was like, yuck, why would you do that for a girl? I don't know.
Did you tell her you liked green? Who
Uh,
knows?
I don't think so, but anyway, and, my brother's was white with, I think red and blue polka dots, and so
Okay.
you could kind of see this system theme in the midst of some of that, and, I don't remember specific clown programming, but I know that it's common, so, like,
Mhm.
huh, why was that clown, sitting on my dresser all my childhood,
Yeah.
looking at me with these sad eyes that always felt, I don't know, creepy.
Right. Yeah, well, you get with the red and blue are the common equilibrium where they'll, pair or twin
Mhm,
one child with the red, one child with the blue,
mhm,
and that goes back to the two, parts of the system, even symbolized like in their finances, where you have the Vatican with the blue, the
mhm.
Sanhedrin with the red. So that's a very common color pairing
Yeah.
for the system. But yeah, you got to ask. You're like, oh, we. I had a grizzly bear that
Wow.
going back to I used to watch with my dad the Grizzly Adams
Mhm,
show back in the early '80s, and uh, I wanted to have that bear that even though I was terrified of grizzly bears, but I wanted to have that bear. And so one of my stuffed bears, I named him Ben, and, would pretend that, that I had this grizzly bear. But that became the one that, all the way even into the time where I had children, I always had that bear in bed with me and was kind of like, a safety teddy
mhm.
bear for me. Yeah.
I love that, and Grizzly Adams was in my childhood too, but it was kind of funny because my parents, because we were Seventh-day Adventist, and in the stricter forms of it, you weren't supposed to go to movies, because
Okay.
the prophet Ellen White said that your angels would not go in the movie theater, so if you went in the movie theater, you were at your own risk.
Okay, that's how that worked, right?
Um, but for some reason, there was the Grizzly Adams movie came out, and I remember kind of my parents sneaking us, into the theater. We were supposed to be
They're
really
like, "Quick,
quiet.
quick, we're gonna go, and let's hope nobody sees us because we don't have our angels with us."
Oh.
It might be true, there might be some validity, I'll just say this in humor because I remember one of my first movies, I was 5 and it really was 5, but anyway, we went in and we had a flasher come in, so all of a sudden, I just remember this guy with a trench coat standing at the front, like, in front of the screen, and we were sitting in the front row, we had no idea what was gonna happen. All of a sudden, it was like, "Oh, oh, what's that? Oh, okay." And then I just remember, like, my eyes being covered and, people escorting this man out as he was screaming.
Oh.
Just a word of caution. No.
Yep, you never know.
That was the only bad thing that ever happened in a theater, so
Wow, wow. Well, there's all these ties in our childhood to different memories and different things, and, we just get
yeah.
to unpack with the Lord, and I think part of that too is I this is fun that we've been able to just laugh because I think remembering the funny things, the good things, helps us along that journey, not to just look back and go, "It's all horrible, it's all awful."
Mhm.
Um, but we have some good memories there as well.
Yeah.
So
I think sometimes we hold on to the things we hold on to, are both things that represent, you know, our worst memories as well as our
mm,
most positive memories. Because I think that's a natural coping mechanism for many that, we have to lighten those severe trauma events. And how do we do that? Whether that's making fun of it later or um, looking at something positive that also happened in that moment.
mhm,
Many of us will do that and associate those worst things also with something that's positive to
mhm.
lighten that blow.
Yeah, definitely. And so, just kind of on this theme of sharing your story, I just want to encourage people that Testimony Mountain is a place you can do that. Feel free to reach out to me. The email will be in the show notes. And even if you want to write it out and I read it, I'm open to that because I do think there's a level of freedom that we step into when we bring those things into the light and when we, are able to share things. So just
Absolutely.
encouragement.
I want to know what some of people's toys are now because that was a good topic to bring up. Like I remember I had a neighbor boy in what grade? Third grade. In fact, his name was Michael Beach. If you're out there, Michael, it'd be fun to reconnect. The only thing we ever really did was bike together. Like we had to walk
Mm,
to school together. So, our parents made us walk to school. And then after school, I had to stay at their house and play until my parents got home from work. But his big thing was the He-Man play set.
mm.
And he had this huge He-Man with all the characters. He even had She-Ra. But Michael would never let me be the She-Ra. He would always make me be whatever that bad guy, the mummy guy, Mumra. I always got to be Mumra, even though I was the worst at, being Mumra. And I can remember that. He'd out of all his toys, he'd just hand me the Mumra and be like, "There, you be Mumra." I always had to be the bad guy.
Oh no.
And we'd fight a lot about it. Like we'd fight and get into these big fights, throwing the He-Man stuff at each other.
One of the toys I remember was, you could have a stick horse, but mine was a stick elephant, so it had an elephant head on it.
Oh, that's creative. That would have been a fun one.
Yeah, and so, it was kind of funny 'cause, there was a point at which, and this would have been 5 or 6, I think, and because we lived in Seattle at the time, and, um, it went missing, and I got together with some other kids in the neighborhood and we were like, someone's stealing our toys. And, we were having this whole powwow about, we needed to catch the one who was stealing our toys. And then I don't know, it was a couple days later, I found it under my bed, but I was convinced that they returned it, you know?
Oh, because you don't remember sticking it. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
So it was like, oh, good. They brought it back. They brought it back, all this. So,
Yep.
um,
It's funny, yeah, because you wonder, you're like, huh, was it parents? Did parents take it? Did they hide it? Did someone take it and hide it and bring it back?
yeah. And, a lot of my early childhood at least well, actually, a lot of my childhood, I was a little bit more of a loner, in that, I just stayed in my room and played. My brother would be outside playing with the kids. I wasn't, you know different survivors have different safe places.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I feel safer inside than outside. And so, I would watch Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street, but my memories are of I was always alone. It wasn't like my brother was
Mm.
there or anybody else um, was with me. And so, um, but my mom wrote in my book that I played with others well, like at their house. So obviously other places and did things and evidently played
Right.
well there. I don't know.
You like I played well. Great.
Oh.
Yeah, I think I was a mix of both. I'm like a fine liner where I sit right between being an extrovert and an introvert.
Mhm,
So I enjoy aspects of both. Like I would have daily situations where, I would set up, I'd be gathering all the cousins, all the people together. I'd be playing all together, but then I'd also have to have my quiet time,
mhm,
usually early mornings or in the evenings, especially. That was when I wanted to, separate and have my time alone. And I never really, I didn't really play alone, I
mhm,
would say. Like, that was, I would get everybody together and, have all these great ideas. And that was where the play and the fun happened. But when I was alone, that was usually when I would be like drawing or
mhm,
looking at books. That was when I was like really thinking and strategizing, especially I was stimulated with a lot of creativity. So anything that I watched, became things that I would sit there and think about. And I can remember, I guess, watch or read, like, because
mhm,
even I can remember, one of my grandmas reading me the nursery rhymes.
mhm,
And those really intrigued me, especially the one, like, we had this great book with pictures with the
mhm,
nursery rhymes. And they had one about the clouds. Like, I don't remember the whole nursery rhyme, but it basically was like if you had a spoon and you could eat the clouds or something like that, what would they taste like? But I was very intrigued by clouds, so then I can remember, like, I'd sit there and think about that nursery rhyme, but it wasn't just eating the clouds, like, then it was, imagining flying and, riding on the clouds and,
wow,
and I would sit there and, like, I was convinced, and this was all before age 3, so just so people have a timeline, I was convinced that I could fly and
mhm,
began to set up all these stations, which included at age 1, I had climbed up my mom had built this dresser with a shelf on it, and she had painted it yellow with a Humpty Dumpty on top, because I liked the nursery rhymes. And I, was so obsessed with flying, I climbed up that shelf, pretty positive that I could jump off it and climb it, right? Or and fly, and the whole shelf came down on top of me, and I broke, like, the bridge of my nose and still have a bump this day from that shelf falling on me. Then I began, trying to convince my cousins and siblings that they could fly, and I'd haul the height chair out there outside and would jump off. And then my other favorite flying device in our yard was the clothesline, and I would run super fast around the pole and then grab on, and you kinda have that point where you, like, like you're swinging down on the ground. That's what I considered flying, but it was kinda
Oh,
funny.
wow. Wow, wow, wow. Yeah, our childhood, is interesting, the different components of it. Um, I mostly had a lot of stuffed animals, and, I didn't really like dolls. I don't just wasn't
I never liked the dolls either.
yeah. Um, but I my room was like the alternate guest room, so it had a big bed, and so when you're a little kid and you're in a big bed, and so when I'd go to bed at night, I would get right in the middle of it, and then I'd put my stuffed animals in order of the ones I liked, the ones I liked closest, and then the ones I didn't like at the far end.
Further out, yeah.
And then I'd lay there really still, and it was like, "Okay, I'm trying not to move so I don't knock any off on the floor." Then, of course, you get up in the morning and many of them are on the floor, and I'd feel bad, and I'd feel like, "Oh, no."
And you're apologizing to the stuffed animal, "I'm
Yes,
sorry,
yes,
I do like you." Then maybe you move them a little closer that night just because you feel bad, right?
yes. Oh.
It's funny how we think as kids, like, many of us are very sensitive and we form it shows how we, like, form attachments too,
Mhm,
that we start to, do all that stuff, and what do we attach to? What do we give emotional significance to?
Yeah.
You know, I had some of that too. I had the piles of stuffed animals, but really only one, only two bears got to sleep with me at night. Um, but I also had a German in our one place. I had a big German cuckoo clock that my parents had got or I think it was the grandparents. Someone had got it from Germany,
Mhm.
but that would be in there, and I would wait all night. I'd stay up all night and wait for that cuckoo bird to come out at midnight. Cuckoo,
Oh,
cuckoo. And
no.
then what interested me was the mechanism that it would be like you'd hear the tick, 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 and then it would
Then
like come out, and then I was just fascinated by that, and I tried to catch it, you know,
Mhm.
and that was a big one too. Besides the flying, I know it was a Looney Tunes episode I had seen, and I was probably real little when I had seen it, like 3, again, 3, 4
Mhm.
years old, but, in that, they had caught the bird by pouring salt on his tail. So I was obsessed, like, I believed I could catch a robin by throwing salt on its tail. So I'd be out there with the salt shaker, and I'd have my little brother in his diaper with a spaghetti pasta drainer colander out there.
Mhm.
And I'd be like, okay, you be ready. Like the moment I get that salt on its tail, you got to put the bowl over it. We're going to catch one of those cocky robins. They were like my enemies because we had a couple male ones in our neighborhood that would always, like, they'd fly and hit the windows,
Ooh.
and hear this thump, you
Yeah.
know. So I was obsessed with those robins and wanted to catch those cocky suckers because they kept hitting my window and flying off.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it is, talking about child perception. When I was 6, my dad's a doctor, and a patient gave him a horse. I don't know why.
Like a
Patients,
real horse?
a real horse, yes.
Oh, wow.
And we lived in the country at a time, and we did have a fence, so we got this horse. But there was a reason the patient gave the horse away. It's one of
Okay.
those things where
So it wasn't a good horse.
no, no. I mean, we named him King, but he was maybe king of the narcissist or something like that, and he only would obey, men usually. But anyway, there was one day when I was riding, and a friend of ours, a neighbor, she was on her horse, and our brothers brought out apples for us. Well, I didn't particularly like an apple, so it was like, I'll just give this to my horse. Well, that started a fight between the horses because the other horse wanted the apple. And so they're getting really restless like this and starting, and as a child, you don't understand, different dynamics. And so I just thought if I should get off the horse. Well, he's a big horse and I'm a 6-year-old. And so I just basically slid under the horse where he stepped on me.
Oh no.
So
Oh,
I still have a place on my leg, that's swollen up from that,
where he did.
you know.
Wow.
But again, it's the, childish things you don't realize. No, you can't just step off a horse that is fighting and not get trampled. So,
Right.
but
Wow. Yeah. Pets are another thing. Yeah. I like to collect a lot of pets, and I just had random things that like would wander into the yard that I would make into pets or leave stuff to try to, lure them to come out and visit, and a lot of bugs. But we had one when I was really little, around age, I was young, like 1 to 2. We had this Samoya that wandered into our yard and then never left. Like she kind of took it on herself, like she saw herself as like a mama dog,
mhm.
for me and some of my little cousins, and she would
Wow.
follow us around. She pretty much lived with us for a while because they don't even know where she came from. We called her Angel. beautiful dog. But she, would just be protective of me and my little cousins, and, was very attentive, which is common for that breed. Like they're really good with little kids. But she was very protective of us. And then one day she just left. And
Wow.
that was as we got a little older, she just wandered off and left. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, we had a variety of dogs and cats. When we moved to Spokane when I was 7, maybe, we had 40 acres. And so, you know, place for the horse and, 2 dogs and a couple of cats. And we had chickens. My great grandmother thought we needed chickens. And,
No, sorry. I am not fond of chickens. But
and so, she got kind of pairs of them. So, a rooster and a hen, which, if you know anything about chickens, is kind of disastrous. And so, the roosters would get aggressive and,
mhm.
peck the feathers off the chickens, or, all those kinds of things. And so my dad's reaction to that was, he would take them and out to the burn pile and just chop their heads off. And we were vegetarian at the time, so we weren't going to eat them. But anyway, so one day my mom, came to us and she said, well, Dad took care of so and so chicken, and because they were in pairs, those two that looked exactly alike. And we went out that day, and my brother and I are like, there he is. And my mom, first thought we just got them mixed up between the hen and the rooster. And it's like, no, it's there. What had happened is my dad was so mad at this chicken that he wrung its neck, and it started flopping around like it was dead. So he just threw it in the burn pit.
Oh, and it came back. It
Back.
came back. Chicken came
And so
back.
we named it Lazarus.
I love this story. This is a
But
great story.
he didn't learn his lesson. And so a couple weeks later, my dad had to go and make sure that his neck was severed.
Oh, no.
Oh, anyway, so we had
That's
adventures with
actually a
chickens.
humorous story when you think of it, but there's some dark components to it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we had some interesting pets like that too, but um that we had so with our rooster story, and it's a still the story goes on in the family. But my sister, her class for kindergarten, they gave away chickens, like little chicks, but they thought, they're like, oh no, we look, they're all hens and stuff. And we didn't even have anything. They didn't even prepare parents. We thankfully had like an empty fish tank, that so we stuck this chick in there with a light for, through the week until we could go out to the family farm on the weekend. And the thing just never shut up. And I kept telling my parents, I'm like, it's not a hen, that is a rooster. And they're like, no, no, it's a hen. And I'm like, no, it's not. That's a rooster. And so anyway, ended up it was a rooster. And when we got it out to the family farm, my great aunt, the thing just fell in love with her, and would be, I mean, he was like a little lover rooster with my great aunt, who's this elderly woman. He literally would, like, it was so funny, like he'd even make this little noise, like he'd do this little thing with his neck, like he was rubbing, you know, the side of her face, and he'd be like,
Oh my.
like, and he would just like hop up on the kitchen counter, be like, like, but everybody else, he was so mean. Like he would peck at the back of your heels, chase you, and peck at the back of your legs. And everybody in the family hated him except for this great aunt. So there's all these stories about this rooster in the family, and he actually died. Like was cooking the one day, and he grabbed a chicken bone and choked on a chicken bone. That was how he died.
Oh no.
Yeah. And she was like, give him mouth to mouth, give him mouth to mouth. And everybody was like, nope,
Nope.
we're going to let that sucker go. Because he was so mean.
Oh,
It was sad, but it was
Yeah.
It was his time, he shouldn't have ate the chicken bone.
Nope. Nope. No cannibalism.
Right?
We had a problem with our dogs. We had one dog that would chase the chickens, and then if he caught him, then he would kill him. And it wasn't that he was trying to, I just think he didn't know what he was doing, kind of thing. And so we had tried everything and all that. And the way our house had been built kind of on the edge of a cliff. And so the entryway, when you open the main doors, they came into kind of this entryway, and then it dropped down into the living room. And so there were plants that kind of were a barrier between, the stories. And so this one day, we had a bunch of relatives at our house, and they were all down in the living room and all that. And we heard the dog barking, and we knew he was after the chickens. And it sounded like it was by the doorway. So my brother and I, we were running upstairs, and we throw open the door, and this chicken with no tail feathers
Oh no.
comes flying in, flies over the planter and down into the living room and lands in the middle of our guests. And I was like, okay, this is
Did
interesting.
the dog follow? Like,
No. But anyway, it was pretty funny. So
yeah.
if we had only had our video cameras running, it would have, won the funniest home videos for the year.
Right. You're like,
Oh, so
yeah. We had one, it was he actually was a stupid dog. Like there's some animals that really have just no smarts, no brain.
yeah.
But a big lug of a dog, a hunting dog. He was supposed to be a hunting dog, but ended up being gun shy.
Mhm.
But there were some funny things because we had two dogs at the time, and the other was like one we had kind of rescued. He had been a mutt, and he was a real timid, fearful dog. But the two would play off each other really funnily. It just make me laugh. Like I'll just call him Dopey. Dopey would sit at the bottom of these stairs and lay there, and then when he'd get up, the timid dog would go and lay in his place and think, oh, this is great, it's nice and warm, and I'm just going to kind of hide under this step, right? But then Dopey would come running, and he'd kind of launch off the step and do this like wrestler move, crashing on top of the other dog. And then they would get in trouble. Like, for whatever reason, Dopey had this thing where he would search out any like razor blades that you would use in shavers, and he liked to eat the razor.
Oh no.
He would actually eat it, and we got where he would like destroy the whole bathroom. Like he destroyed our whole bathroom looking for these shavers that he could chew up and eat the little blades out of. And so, my parents had removed him out of there, but he'd keep like destroying the bathroom looking. And the one day we came home, and as we're walking down the hallway to the bathroom, all of a sudden it's like, oh, Dad, like, why is the carpet sopping wet? Like it started getting this squishy, like squish, squish. And I'm like, why is the carpet wet? And we go in there, and the whole bathroom's flooded, and the two dogs are sitting in the bathtub to be out of the water. And they had somehow, in his searching, he had turned the sink
Oh,
faucet on, and then the sink had started overflowing, and the dogs were sitting in the bathtub to avoid the flooding bathroom. And as it was coming out into the hallway, everything, it was bad.
oh. Wow. Wow. Wow.
But
Wow. Well, animals bring us joy and laughter, definitely.
yeah, and can be a very integral part of the things that have happened to us as kids, and
Yeah.
animals, toys, all sorts of stuff that stimulate memories.
Well, this has been really fun. I'm glad we could have a lighter side time together today. And I just want to encourage anyone who has been watching, share your favorite toy or your favorite experience in the comments, and we're just going to have some fun laughing together and enjoying
Yeah.
this. And, as we talked earlier about sharing your testimony is definitely open to hearing your testimony and sharing it on Testimony Mountain. Just get in touch with us and let us know. So any last thing you want to share, Jessie?
No, I think that what a fun, good way to end a harder conversation,
Yes.
but that's a good way to start,
Mhm.
perfect examples of how do we start to share our testimony. It just starts by even thinking back to, things that in your childhood, things that were present,
Yep.
sharing about those. So
So good. So good. All right. Well, thank you for being with us. Encourage you to like, subscribe, share, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time on Testimony Mountain.